Hello, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Careers Sitrep 2. Happy Friday. A very warm welcome to you all. And this is the second time we've done this. As you probably know, about 4 weeks ago, we did our inaugural one on Armed Forces Day, and it was a great success. And thank you very much indeed for all of those who tuned in, and particularly those who gave some great questions to us to answer. So that was a great session. So this is our second time of doing this. So you remember that we talked about, 4 weeks ago, we talked about we've had a pretty challenging 15 months. We've all felt that, but it's also had been a period with a lot of opportunities as well. So some industries have really suffered in terms of vacancies for members of the armed forces leaving and in transition, and some have done pretty well. So last time we talked all about the NHS and the amazing opportunities that exist. Well, today we're going to be talking about tech and cyber, which really is a very exciting industry for many people to get into, particularly for service leavers and veterans. Okay, so we're going to be talking about this for about the next hour, having a nice sort of chat. So for those of you out there who are either in transition or have left or considering it, hopefully there'll be something for you to give you some tips into the industry, what strengths and what attributes that people in the tech and cyber industry are looking for, hopefully to help you on your journey. Okay, so it's not just going to be me, you'll be very pleased to hear on my own today, but I'm Alistair Halliday, Chief Exec of RFA, the Forced Employment Charity. And but I'm actually delighted to be joined by a really very special team today of guests. So the first I'd like to introduce is Nicola Moxon, who is an Army veteran. She served for 25 years in the Royal Signals and now has landed a superb job. She's in with Next as a Senior Security Analyst. Also a TechVets volunteer, and already really coming to grips with some fantastic stuff in the tech cyber industry. So welcome, Nikki. Great to see you. I've also got James Murphy. James Murphy is Director of TechVets, has been doing that for the last 18 months. Superb program, and we'll be coming on to that. Really helping a lot of service leavers and veterans into the industry. For that, he was worked in the Cabinet Office, and for that, he was in an ex-infanteer for a while, and then Intercorps. So again, Army veteran who's now made transition and is now doing great things in the industry. And third, Luke Spencer. Welcome, Luke. Great to see you. So Luke is now a penetration tester, or pen testing. We'll come on to what that really means during the course of the next hour. He's made a great start in that. He's been doing that for a bit of time. That's after about 10 years in the Army Royal Tank Regiment, a great service, specialist gunner and all of that, and seen some interesting places, and now making a real has made a great hit in the industry. So it's quite a good team. And I'm Alistair. I was served about 33 years in the Royal Navy. So it's we're all served, all made transition, and we want to talk about those sort of things. Okay, so I think, for those who don't know the routine, this is going live on Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn. So please do post a question for us or a comment or anything like that, and we will post them up on the bottom of the screen, and we will tackle them. So please do ask us about anything, any concerns or any issues or any questions which come to your mind. Anyway, but before we get into the main thing, I'd just like to bit of a canter round to sort of warm it up, and this is very much a bit of a sort of chat. Really about our own experiences in transition. How did we find it? So there are people have different experiences going through the process. So perhaps Nikki, I don't know, what was your sense? How did it work for you? I wouldn't say you'd do it again, but I mean, any lessons learned for anybody else? How would you say?
Lessons learned is plan for a pandemic during it. Obviously, we are quite organised prior to leaving the military, especially if you're coming towards the end of your career. So you have that 2 years, put your plan in place, ready for the exit date. However, obviously, April last year was my last day in uniform, just about as everybody was in lockdown. I did get the decision. Did I want to stay or did I want to go? But I did think that my plan that I'd put in place would survive the contact, which it did, luckily. But however, my lady of leisure, couple of months turned into homeschooling, trying to learn from my next chapter, and also trying to fill as much opportunity as I can. Luckily, with everything being virtual, I did get a chance to network quite a bit. It did feel like I was solidly in front of the laptop, just talking to so many people. Luckily, it wasn't the same person because the ears were burning. But no, the first part of the transition, I was more concerned because it wasn't, because I'm quite relaxed, and every decision that I was going to make, I was going to be responsible for, and it's always been that way. I was going to take 3-4 months of downtime, decompress a little bit, because obviously 24 years in, you could be a completely different person on the outside. hopefully I've not changed too much. I've still got all my values and standards and etc. in the workplace. But yeah, so I started off studying quite hard, and then obviously joined TechVets. I was a little bit quiet there for the first couple of months because everyone spoke a completely different language. Everyone had these crazy names and things like that. So if anybody's listening who is on TechVets, I'm Nikki. That is it. That is about as exciting as my online Discord name goes. I've never even heard of it. So that was the start of my confidence in getting into tech and cybersecurity, even though I'd had 24 years in that technical background. So I kind of embraced it. I got a 12-week internship. That opportunity again came from TechVets with Steve Cockcroft. So I attended an Insider Threat program, obviously distant learning for 12 weeks, and that solidified where I wanted to be. Because again, it's a confidence thing. I think with leaving the forces, you're leaving that blank, it's risk, it's unknown. However, just that 3-month period provided me with that, this is where you need to be. And then, I just didn't look back. So the kids finally went back to school in September. Not much of a party there, and then went away and did a security risk management consultancy course. And then in October, I landed the job with Next. So that was kind of my transition period. I've kind of forgotten about the 2 years planning beforehand because some of it did have to change direction. I just had to make sure that I owned it and ended up in that same sector as where I want to be, because the army sets you up really well. It gives you all these skill sets. It's just knowing where you're going to put yourself. Because you can, every 3 years, you can get into a new role, get trained within 2-3 weeks and still deliver to that high standard, which I think can be a bit of a downfall during transition, because it's just finding your way. And then I ended up with my role at Next. And again, that was down to the veteran network and knowing where availabilities are going in and getting that CV in front of the employers. That was the main thing really to take forward.
That's fantastic, Nikki. I mean, in fact, there are so many themes in there, which I know we'll be coming back to, preparation in the period before we actually do leave, but also I think the role of networking in it as well. And very good. And actually quite amazing to have done that in lockdown. And I do know in terms of the stats, a lot of people are actually staying in at the moment because of sort of fears about the industry in the round. But actually people will be leaving. So that experience is quite amazing. No, thanks, Nikki. Great. James, how was it for you?
I was quite lucky, I suppose. I was injured back on Herrick 6, and it forced me to have a bit of a career change. And I decided at that point I needed to plan for the future and have an exit sort of strategy. So I had a 5-year plan. What was really nice about that, and one thing that I would pass on to everyone, is don't plan once you've signed off. Have a plan, and signing off will be part of that at some stage. Because otherwise you just don't know what's going to happen. Nikki's mentioned the pandemic. For me, I was medically discharged. I had 3 months to get out the door, to get a job. And I nailed it to the month on my 5-year plan just because I networked so hard. And I think that's the other key point to take away there. You have to network. And networking isn't just about getting a job. What that helped me do over that 5-year period was really understand who I was, what I wanted to do, what sort of company, what organization, what sort of industry I wanted to go in, because I was able to learn so much from the people I was talking to. But I left the Incorps. I was really an absolute generalist, and I didn't really know exactly where I fitted. At that point, I was able to use the TechVets network to really focus that networking into cyber, and I landed the role at GDS. But it was a soft landing. Again, I tell a lot of people, if you want to break into a different industry and you want to do it relatively painlessly, beyond the fact that it takes about 9 months to get through the door in a civil service role because the recruitment takes so long. But there's some fantastic opportunities, and government digital service was exactly that. And I took over the head of cyber threat intelligence there, used TechVets to do some training, enough to get a good understanding. But I also brought forward all of my skills that I'd learned with my Incorps days, understanding how to run an intelligence program. And as Nikki did with her technical background, mine was intelligence, and it was just mapping that into this new role. And I found that all the soft skills I had made it incredibly easy within that first 6 months to hit the ground running, to grab that team, start getting it to gel together, making decisions, and having an impact. And beyond that, everything just became fairly normal. And now it almost seems like it never happened. And I've always been in this role, taking on sort of TechVets from January last year, absolute dream job. And I now get the absolute pleasure of helping people out like Luke, Nikki, etc., working with Nikki now as a volunteer. And we have a wonderful community. So it's pretty fabulous.
That's great, James. Great to hear that experience. And actually, and again, the planning bit comes in there as well, isn't it? But that's good. And of course, Luke's your experience is different in terms of the regiment you're in. Not many links into the industry and everything. How did you find it?
So a little unlike James and Nikki, I was not quite as organised and didn't really have a plan of what I wanted to do. Yeah. But I knew I had to just do it. And then use the year of being signed off to figure that out, what I was going to do. So I signed off early January 2018. So I had until January 2019 to figure everything out. At that point, I didn't have anything. I don't have much school education to fall back on, no college. And not many industries really need tank specialists on the outside. I have an MVQ in engineering, but I knew I didn't really want to follow that on the outside world. So, yeah, I had HGV licenses, which became my fallback. So that was the first thing I did. I got a CPC, which allowed me to then drive commercially. During my last year, I took a post into Canada for 7 months, which effectively didn't do much for my resettlement. I came back August. That year, I had a month to get everything in order. While I was in Canada, I did do a HTML5 course, which kind of got me on to maybe I could do a job in tech. This is really interesting. And then it was one night within my month back, I was catching up with my 2IC one evening, and he sort of said, "Why don't you try cybersecurity?" And that was from there. That was pretty much where it picked up. Within that month, I'd got in contact with LCAS, found some courses on there to do, kind of start from the bottom, work up. And that was the journey, really. I then went to America for 3 months for my last 3 months of military service. Studied there for a little while with a friend. And then, within that time, I was in the TechVets community. I kind of downsized my life because my transition took 2 years. Coming from nothing and not really having a plan didn't really help that. But and then January, it really became more apparent when it was through TechVets. Actually, I found out about Crucial Academy, which was another service for veterans. I don't know if that's still working the same way, but I went there. There was an open day. It was my first experience of networking. I made friends, and that effectively came as my way of figuring out exactly what I wanted to do. I figured out that's offensive securities for me. They were saying this is the more tricky one, so naturally I was like, okay, yeah, I'll do that one then. And then it was a case of just studying. I then passed my Network Plus, Security Plus, different exams, all the while being a truck driver on the side. So it was quite hard to study at times, and it was a case of I'd read the books and the textbooks, take voice notes, and then play them all through the day while I'm driving around, trying to learn something, trying to improvise. And I sort of carried that on for 2 years through the COVID crisis. There wasn't really much work going around. And then eventually made my foot in the door with Pen Test People around 3 months ago. And that's been me, really. And now web application pen tester, and it's brought me to here.
It's a brilliant story, Luke. I mean, in fact, dare I say, pretty inspirational, actually. I mean, I hear a lot of people, who, again, many people who don't have any background in it, and it's fantastic to hear you just, frankly, just keeping your eyes and ears open to opportunities from that moment when somebody suggested tech cyber, to then think about the courses, LCAS, going through that process, and then looking at the opportunities yourself. Fantastic, the way you've done that, and to get those qualifications jump you into the position where you are now. And I think a lot of people will be thinking, blimey, that's amazing, and they would like to do the same. So very well done. That's a great story. And again, lots of themes come out of that, which I think we'll be touching on during the course of the chat. I think there's an overall theme about this new opportunity. Well, it's not brand new, of course, is it? But it's been building big time over the last few years. But I think when people talk about transition, in the past, there were some roles that people used to always think that people who left the armed forces went into. Yeah. And so there were others which nobody knew. But James, what's your sense on sort of the areas where people used to go, dare I say, well, which are very popular, and the new areas of where of industries which are really expanding, and there's a good opportunity for veterans? What's your sense?
So look, certainly there was some decent research and papers, etc., that came out, which gave us some really interesting data, and most of that was around 2017. A combination of PwC's report and the MOD's People Survey, and what we could see from that was that actually of the 2.4 million veterans, there were about 4% of them were going into ICT, information communications technology, which is really, really low. But then when you think about it, if you take the army, for example, someone like Luke, like me, coming from a teeth arms background in the infantry, the armored corps or artillery, you don't use computers on a daily basis. You may get access to one once a month. So actually, when you think about it in those terms, it's not natural for many people to go out into ICT because they've never done it. And then when you look at the resettlement process, the way it works, you sign off, you're proactively walking towards unemployment. Whereas when I took my role at TechVets, I landed this role before canning my one at GDS, so there was no risk, which is lovely. And I think because of that, when we're leaving, I think one of the biggest issues that I find with people is that they will take the low risk option. Because when you've got 3 months left and someone says, here's an AWS cloud restart program for 12 weeks, many will look at that and think, I don't know, what if I don't make it? And if I don't make it, I've wasted that last 3 months. So many of them are going into these traditional sort of pathways into construction, manufacturing, transportation and logistics, which is great. But they were going into roles where, we're already seeing they're being redefined by automation. And over the next 5 to 10 years, increasing use of machine learning. We're hearing a lot about artificial intelligence. Take of that what you wish. I think it doesn't necessarily properly exist at the moment, but there's lots more opportunities now. And now when you look at where we're at, the pace of change with digital transformation, which has been one of the most prominent programs within most companies over the last 3 to 5 years, it's been accelerated. And many companies have accelerated their digital transformation by 5 years over the last 18 months, which is quite incredible. And now we're seeing everyone using digital and tech. Even people working on a market stall have to understand how to use electronic payment methods. Drivers are using cameras, not wing mirrors. I speak to people working in warehouses. They don't want any forklift drivers. It's all automated. It's all robotics. So therefore, there's increasing opportunities. And if you look at cybersecurity, we're looking at sort of 2027. That's going to reach roughly around 210 billion pounds, which is huge as an industry. And everything needs protecting, but also there's a lot of tech out there for all sorts of routes in, and you don't have to be an absolute specialist. But salaries have clearly, been driven up, and average salaries in tech are higher than they are. I've just seen a question come in from JJ. So JJ says, thanks very much, JJ. One of the biggest challenges facing service leavers, in my opinion, is the ability to translate military experience into a way civilian employers and hiring managers are able to understand in order to see the skills they bring to the table. And that's exactly it. That compounds the issue, that when you're trying to leave and you've had a whole career where it's been in the military, internally focused, how do you then align those skills? And when you're under pressure, you go to those places where there's loads of military already in there, and they can help you do that. And we are starting to see, though, increasing numbers start making that journey using things like TechVets to make that journey in, because we can link people directly with those people that understand their skills.
Cheers, James. I mean, it is, JJ, thank you very much indeed. It's a great question that you just put in there, and actually very much linked to this thing about, new industry, new sectors. And so areas where people like, say Luke's experience, who didn't have any detailed sort of experience, these wider skills that people have in serving in the military, to be able to get those across. And an increasing number of employers probably do know that. But we still need to educate them so they can recognise it, that people who served in the armed forces have got these extra skills and then ability to make sure you get them across. Nikki, what's your sense on how to get across the more wider skills from the armed forces?
I think that was one of the areas that I actually struggled with. So I had about obviously the 2 years of prior planning, and then along came the CV at the end of it. You need to sum up your absolutely brilliant career, all that travel, all that experience into 2 pages, and knowing where to fit and align them. And that was one of my biggest concern, it probably took me longer to get everything down on paper, what I've done, than anything else. Dissertations, everything, it took longer to do that. But I think in terms of our skill set, it's understanding what you can bring to the table. I'd only been in, obviously you've got that confidence, you've got that bit of imposter syndrome all of the time. I don't think that matters whether you're leaving the military or as soon as you go into a new job, you think, can I do it? Can I do it to the best of my ability? But then I look back and I think, right, everyone's had that baseline of training. You've got them basic skills. Somebody can turn somebody off, coming in off the street, and within 12, 14 weeks, you've turned them into what you want to be. So we are very adaptable. I think my well-rounded soft skill set, and the ability to work, at speed, under pressure, be responsible for decisions, and that has definitely helped me with that skill set. And I think definitely focus on, even if you are going into that technical and cyber role, because like James said earlier, them traditional routes, I am an offender. I did do that at the beginning of my resettlement, but I had to go back to, what I believed and what I wanted to, the route I had to go down, which was the tech and cyber, rather than going into that traditional role. This is where my key skills are. I can do this, I can do that. So I just went, no, I'm going to stick with this. And I not played on it, but when I had my interviews and things like that, I focused on the soft skills, what the army had given me, and how quickly it can train and how quickly it can develop. And that support network, again, that's around you. So if you didn't know something, you would go away and learn it and make sure you can still deliver on time. So that's the kind of areas that I focused on. But yeah, CVs that's why I kind of volunteered that bit now, because it's the most painfulest part of transition, especially if you don't network very well, and that's the only thing that's getting to the recruiter or an employer.
Well, the soft skills you mentioned though, Nikki, as well, the soft skills are really important, and there's 3 in 10 cyber firms are really struggling with skills, and the skills aren't all technical. 22% of companies are struggling with the soft skills, and that's within the people that they've got as well as new candidates, because the talent pool is fairly dry. So to get someone with industry experience, technical experience in industry of like 3 to 5 years, you've got to pull them out of somewhere else, which is expensive. So now people are looking at far more diverse talent pools, and the benefit that the military have. And someone mentioned, thank you for the comment a minute ago about the values and standards, but that's exactly it. You've got a very well-rounded professional who's been developed, that person's been developed over X number of years with value standards, but also interpersonal skills, which are so important when so many technologists are introverts and very much geared towards building relationships with code on a screen and not as good with people. And everyone has to be a consultant now, and Luke will definitely know this from his role. When you're going out and you're speaking to people, when you're trying to solve complex problems or explain a complex vulnerability to a customer, you've got to be able to do that in a very clear and concise way. And you've got to have those interpersonal skills. I mean, that's got to be a top one for you, Luke, surely.
Yeah, absolutely. It's, you find with the different clients you deal with as well, you'll speak to technical teams and then you'll speak to just like developers, and although they're technical, you can mention things that you found and they'll be like, well, what does that mean? Sort of thing. And you've got to know how to break that down, and it's catering to your audience. I think it's something a lot of military people sort of don't sell when they come out. Like when you do instructor courses, you usually learn how to deal with officers and then soldiers, and they're the 2 different categories. You've got them like a more technical side and then sometimes a more simple side, and being able to do that is like a massive help, and not overcomplicate everything, because it gets out of hand if you let it run.
I've experienced that. Well, I say sometimes to my guys, if I'm looking confused, I dread to think, whoever you're trying to explain it to, but we are like chameleons. You've already said, you can be dropped into an environment, which I found quite quickly. Within about 8 days, it didn't feel like I'd been anywhere else, and I wasn't standing out. It's not a bad thing. You're getting in there and you're blending in quite well, because it can be a little bit daunting, because some of the young guys, you don't appreciate what the military's giving you until you've been dropped into another environment, because you're just having general conversation, and then suddenly you'll mention where you've been in like the last 2 years, and like, a young person on your team, like some of the young analysts, they're just like, they can't believe it. But to me, we just took it for granted. That's normal. What do you mean you're going to 4 countries a year? I was very fortunate. One of my other passions, doing my skeleton bobsleigh, I spent 6-7 weeks a year in Europe, traveling 80-mile-an-hour head first. But to a 23-year-old, they're like, you're absolutely crazy. However, even that has helped me within the tech environment. It's that tech in risk, it's opportunity all of the time. So every single part of your military career, it gets thrown into it. You can bring everything into that arena.
Yeah, that's a great point. In fact, Jacko's a great question here actually about soft skills or indeed hard skills, and actually about that there is a huge need, and I think the MOD and Defence has got better at this, but there's still work to be done about accrediting the military training, which is, I think that there's still more work to be done on that. So I know that the Defence has moved on in the last 10 and 15 years, which is good, but actually that does need to happen more. But it is identifying these soft skills, and actually a point that you say, Nikki, there actually about chameleon-like, I think is a great one, and I've used the same phrase. And there's something about getting used to a new environment and settling in and moving on very quickly. And I think people in the armed forces have tended to do that every couple of years, which is an important thing. But then there is a knack of retaining the sort of ethos, the good bits that we've all had in our armed forces experience, but not overplaying that to fit into the new environment. And I think, going back to Luke, what you mentioned there, I think there's a real opportunity now for armed forces, for service leavers, veterans in this industry. And it is around the communication, because we're pretty used to doing that, whatever level in the armed forces, with our leadership, the training and all the rest of it, in an environment when quite a few people, in fact, James's point, that quite a few people perhaps do find it more difficult to communicate what they're doing. So the knack is quickly understanding what the new lexicon, the terms are. It's a whole new language, isn't it? I mean, Luke, I'm sure getting your head around all the new phrases and stuff which you did in training, and then picking up as you go along, but then actually communicating it in a way which everyone can understand. So I think there's an opportunity there. I don't know, Luke, is that how you felt it? I mean, in terms of being able to communicate to your work colleagues.
Yeah, I got it from both angles really, because coming from a non-technical background, it was quite a curve to then be in conversations with heavily technical people who have studied university, and then they go on and they have done this and only this. They are security consultants. So coming into it was quite hard to do that, but then it's a common military thing where you always pick up on the terminology people are using and the way they're bringing stuff together, and you end up doing that naturally, and it then comes out in your vocabulary because you're used to that sort of teaching side of life. But effectively it's
I mean, but I think back to all the places and all the times, like Nikki said, around the world in 80 days every year, and all the times that you get attached to another unit on an exercise where you're deploying somewhere, you're dealing with Afghan national forces and the police and the people, next minute you're over in Canada, and I think when you're dropped in these places, so to speak, and you've got people that you've never seen before in your life, you have, and the sense and purpose around teamwork and the bonds that you have to build very quickly, you get very well versed in building relationships very quickly. And that's something that I found incredibly important. And yes, look, great point from Shaw there. Flexibility is huge. Never be afraid of asking questions. But that's part of it. That's part of those building relationships quickly, is being able to adapt to a situation, be flexible to suit that context that you're having that initial conversation in, and really understand people quickly. But be someone who's adding value to that team. Be there supporting them, making sure they've got the resources they need. But ask those questions, because again, there'll be many people as well that won't want to ask the questions. You'll get people that are super technical who just won't want to ask because they don't want to put their hand up in a room of people. And again, if you don't show the way in how to really embrace each other in a team and drag the best out of everyone, then it doesn't really work. And I think that's something that we're really incredible at. And again, going back to Jacko's point with the soft skills versus hard skills, the soft skills can't really be taught. They're stuff that you develop over your career, and experience will bring, depending on what your experience is, you'll deliver those sort of skills on a daily basis. And I think the benefit of military when they leave is that we talk a lot about strategic in the military, but actually most of it isn't, unless you're head of service or chief of defense staff. Most of it is operational delivery, which is absolutely perfect. You've got resource allocation, you've got multidisciplinary teams, you've got challenging situations, timelines that are tight, You know, you've got missions, objectives, deliverables, effects, you know, and all of this is able to map across into where there's massive gap in businesses, especially in cyber. People that understand people, that can get into a situation, adapt quickly to change. Loads of work done by Deloitte with the veterans work stuff, highlighting those skills, interpersonal skills, leadership, the ability to not just be confident to stand up and make a decision, but be responsible and take accountability for that decision. But being able to work with others and bring them together, to manage a team, but also to learn quickly. And I think Nikki highlighted that as well. You know, the ability to be able to pick up technical skills very quickly is a lot easier than the soft skills. So therefore, they get highlighted. It's difficult to highlight those on a CV, but that's where at interview, a service leaver comes into their own, where they can explain the experience and really deliver and show that person side of it. That's usually where we see people getting the wins.
It's a very good point about, James, about interviews, that if people can get to an interview. And I know clearly there was some work we did a couple of years back on veteran strategy, getting guaranteed interview schemes for jobs in the civil service. And we're trying to roll that out, because quite clearly, if you get to that position, people's confidence and communication and all the other bits and pieces start coming across. But quite often it can be a task. I know, coming back to some of the questions now, about, you know, relating those soft skills. Some employers know it. And Jacko, I know in DRM, does a fantastic job in educating a lot of employers about and changing perception of veterans. So, you know, do I don't say take a punt, do get them into interview, because you will then know that they're adaptable to take on the next challenge. They won't suddenly say, "Oh, I can't do that. I've never done it." So it's a very, very different. It's a very different environment, which is good. I mean, I know I suppose we've been talking about generic things in any industry. I mean, we've been touching a bit on tech and cyber. If we think more specifically about the industry, are there any key things which we need to consider? I mean, in terms of the roles, is there anything more we can pluck out now? So certainly for those who are watching or listening who don't know much about the industry. I don't know, Nikki, your sense on the or James. I mean, or you know, what are the key roles? Then what particular attributes that service leavers have in the tech side, as opposed to more generically?
Do you want me to jump in? Do you want me to jump in with the sort of industry, and then you can do the skills, Nikki, probably, because you know a lot more about the skills. You're implementing them, I don't. But I suppose when people leave, there's a misconception that it's, I mean, no offense, Luke, but it's all pen testing, it's all hacking, and that's what cybersecurity is. We get lots of people that's their first question. How do I get into pen testing? We generally look at it as offensive security, where you're looking to test systems for vulnerabilities to then help people fix them. You've got defensive cybersecurity, which helps stop attacks and also respond to attacks. You know, and you've got your cyber threat specialists, where they're literally applying cyber threat intelligence based on traditional military intelligence processes and methodologies. And then you've got your sort of governance, risk and compliance, another great area for service leavers to go into. And then you've got the sort of management track. But I suppose even better, if someone is watching now and considering a route in a journey into cybersecurity, absolutely 100% visit the UK Cybersecurity Council's website. They've got a careers bit. It's not 100% finished yet, but they've got a wonderful map with 16 specialisms on. And that will give you a much better flavor for all the sort of variety of roles, rather than just the offensive stuff. There's all sorts in there, from digital forensics through to the governance, risk, compliance stuff, and everything in between. And that gives you a real good bit of information about the skills, the roles, the responsibilities within those specialisms as well. But I think there's always stuff for everyone. You can work in sales in cybersecurity. Sales is important. No one brings home a salary if people aren't selling stuff. So there's some really key roles there that are non-technical. You know, we've put people into technical engineer, sales engineers, where they're out with a customer, selling the platform, working the platform. You know, we have people that do supporting roles, business development, etc. Project management in tech as well is a useful route. If you're going down the tech project management route, definitely go into tech project management. And then you get all the way to the more technical stuff, your data scientists, your programmers and software devs, etc. But it's definitely worth having a look. There is so much on offer. It's not just about hacking.
Luke. I'm only joking.
Sorry, Luke. Yeah, sorry.
It sounds better, doesn't it? It was just like that new word of, but no. So going through to mine then. So I work in the defensive side. So we get people like Luke to come in to check our defences. Hopefully they don't get through. So you're not coming in with a battle tank. So we're all good in Leicester in our HQ. So looking at myself, there's a lot of information out there at the minute, whichever platform, which social network that you're on. And a big thing people do focus on, who've not come from the technical backgrounds, is the certifications for it. So with myself, I kind of did it the opposite way around. So I just focused on what I had now, what I'd been around in, and this is what I can deliver. So I ended up in incident response. So in that operational role, which is something I'm used to, something that I've brought in from the military when we've been deployed to different environments, whether that's Iraq, Afghanistan, or even on exercise in the UK. Working in that communications environment, I brought that into the incident response because you know how to get things across timely. You know, you're analytical, you're thinking about things from every single side. You're not just one task focused. You've got that holistic view, which has definitely helped. Obviously, all the CompTIA exams, brilliant, but you need that experience behind you. And one of the things that I wish I did in my transition is probably get that experience within the cyber field. So if you are in resale and you do get that chance to get 3 months of industry experience, albeit it might be virtual now, that is one of the key things, just to make sure, one, you're going to be going into an area that you're going to enjoy, because if it doesn't get out of your bed in the morning, especially if you're working at home, you are going to end up staying in there all day and not want to get out of bed and sit behind your many screens at home. And so that was one of the things with me. But again, the key skills that I think I've gone in and done is, again, it's that leadership front, is bringing that team together, using, yes, my soft skills, but my technical background, I'm quite quick at picking things up, and I'll go away and I'll learn. I'm proactive in that sense. So if I'm sat in on a meeting and I hear something, don't know it, I'll write it down, very old fashioned, get my notebook out, write it down, and I'll go and investigate it later in my own time to make sure the day after, you know, I completely understand what's going on, so that I can then develop the junior soldiers and the junior analysts to bring them. Well, they are like soldiers, aren't they? Don't tell them that if they're listening. But yeah, just to bring them on as well, because I think that's another thing. It's like the servant style leadership as well. You can take that into the technical background, because you're always thinking, you know, I'm more concerned about the rest of the team than my own development, because they will help me develop as a manager and leader as we go on. So I'm more constantly aware of, you know, mentoring what they want to do. And then I go, oh, I've got to go and panic cram now because I forgot I've got an exam in 2 days. So that's where I find myself at the minute. But no, that within Next, there's so many different technical roles within cyber. You know, you have got the engineers, which are a lot more technical. So I would say if you are looking at going down the engineering route, you are going to have that experience behind you prior. But you've got threat management, vulnerability management, especially the incident response side. I've found it seems a natural fit for somebody coming out of the military, just to how you bounce back as well. You know, you've got that pressure on you. If you've got somebody breathing down your neck, you know, there's something going on in your network and you need to stop it, and you can't find it. It's just like being out on the battlefield or out on exercise. You're going to have your section commander shouting at you, you know, where's your decision? How have you got there? You know, and then at the end of it, being responsible. You know, some kind of, you know, younger members of a team can be scared of making a decision, and they've got to ask. Whereas in the military, it's kind of from day one, it's your decision, you've made it. You know, regardless of the outcome, if it's wrong, you'll learn from it. So that's one of my many chit chats going off.
I think your point on certifications is a really important one, and I'm going to bring Luke in on this because he's most recent and also went pretty technical. But we have a real issue, and that's, you know, people buy in. There's a huge gap in the market, and therefore that's been filled by a lot of vendors. Nothing against them; they need to make money, but that pitch is so strong that people buy into the fact that they can go 0 to hero in 10 days, get into cyber, and they you know, chuck out all these 70k average salaries that are just unrealistic. They're average for the whole industry, from chief exec down to entry level. But there is a balance, you know. And one thing that we always say is that you should do the training for the CompTIAs. It's great modules, gives you great fundamental skills. You don't need all the certifications. You need maybe 1 or 2 certs to get yourself through the door, through the CV sift. But then when you get to interview, you've got to know what you're doing with those skills, you know. And those courses generally will train you to pass the exam. because they are designed to be crammed before the exam. But you've got to be able to implement the skills, because you get technical questions at technical interviews, and you've got to be able to solve problems. And Luke, what was your balance like with nailing the certifications versus just knowing what to do and learning hands-on?
I think once it got to sort of the practical side of pen testing, that kind of took over, like using services like Hack the Box and Try Hack Me, which I got through the TechVets community. Once you get to that point, that kind of takes over, because then you're able to, I would take notes and talk myself through what I've just done, what that means, what's happened, so as you can then explain that to an interviewer. Because when I found with interview processes, for me, it was with no experience, you're leading with your exams that you've done, and your soft skills, like we've been talking about. Is it was a functional CV, as they call it, because it comes from no background. So you've really got to sell yourself to them. Like, I haven't done this job, but I can do it if you give me a chance. So yeah, and then more on certifications, CompTIA was a great route. It's to begin with, I probably did a lot more than I needed to. Like, I started from the strata, which seemed to be more sales, and then I did A+, which I don't know, I don't feel like that came into play much, because after that it was Network Plus, Security Plus, and companies wanted to hear about that. And a lot of, I found with the interview processes, you would get, if you're dealing with a cybersecurity organization like the one I'm with, they will know the ins and outs of all the exams that you've done. So you don't really have to explain anything. But then I had with other companies where they're not really solely focused on cybersecurity, so they will expect more from question side, because they'll be like, right, well, what does this, like, what have you done here? Talk me through what this even means. But if you definitely come from a background of no experience, then certifications are the way forward. If you can say, I am certified in this, because doing the course and then doing the exam can be two different things. Like CPSA is a notoriously very difficult exam for people coming into the industry on the offensive side, and you can read the book and do all the prep, but actually doing the exam is very difficult, because the breadth of knowledge they expect you to know. So yeah, I think in terms of the certifications, if the different ones for the different paths you want to do as well, once you've figured out what path you want to do, just aim for those exams, because they hold a lot of weight in the interview and the CV process, I think, and it brings you out sort of on top. Yeah.
Well, we try to build a culture in TechVets that is really trustworthy and honest, and people will just be brutally blunt in that forum. But I mean, ideally, that's what we wanted, is people to be able to come there and ask those questions. What certifications should I go for? Should I do this one? And generally, you've seen it yourself, Luke. Within 3 seconds, you've got 20 people jumping on that conversation, telling you don't do it, or try this, or whatever it may be. I think it's important. You mentioned industry experience as well, and that's the one Achilles heel that we will have regardless. I mean, none of us, if you've had 4 years out of an industry and you've served the minimum time, you're no longer relevant. But most of us, a lot of us joined from very early on in our lives, and therefore have zero industry experience, and that's really crippling. But we're starting to see a nice shift in the approach of HR managers and teams to look at the individual in a far better way than just on paper what certifications and industry experience they've got, which is quite nice. It's not happening enough yet, but it's a nice upward trend, that's for sure.
It's a great point, and I like, Luke, what you said about showing that frankly the flexibility, that agility, and I think it's a key thing for anyone listening. Really, you can have an idea where you want to go into, but actually, again, when you get into it, look at the opportunities, and having that ability to really look across the piece is a key thing. I think it's a really huge sort of takeaway, perhaps for everybody on this, is when you come back to the complexity, all the huge variety of roles which exist in this industry, and many people, I think, won't necessarily know that. I mean, I don't think even I certainly didn't know all all of the different things. And coming back to, I think, James, your point about, people thinking it's just one element. I mean, 4 weeks ago when we were talking about the NHS used to, I would say, put off people only because people thought it was all about medics. And a lot of people want to do that, but a lot of people don't. Well, that's true. They do need medics, but they also need project managers. They need logisticians. They need, IT specialists. And the same thing in here, in this organisation, in this sector. So it's very exciting, I think, for thinking about all of those potential opportunities. So for people who don't know about it, and James has signposted, a great website to look at, and people can start thinking, I'd like to have a go at that. When you get into it, you might be saying, and I'll do a bit of this. Actually, there's one of these other related roles which might suit me better. Having that flexibility and the confidence to then move around is what I think could set a veteran from perhaps somebody who's not served.
Yeah.
So I think it's really, really interesting points there from everybody. I suppose as we it'd be interesting to sort of try and capture this in sort of top tips. I mean, more general about which we've covered in a way, but sort of capturing. But what would be the key messages, say, Nikki, you think about top tips for somebody who is interested? What sort of things do you might want to do, in sort of going into the tech cyber industry?
Right, okay. I would just say it's that word I think we've bandied around quite a lot during this, is that network piece. And don't be afraid to ask or say if you don't understand something, and don't just follow somebody else's path. Pick your own route at the end of the day. I started off with the project management thing just to solidify what I'd obviously got throughout the last 24 years. However, you just need to follow your own route, and just go with your heart. Whatever you decide to do, as ex-military, you will own it, and if it goes wrong, we know how to deal with that, and we'll bounce back. Some might, if some of my friends are listening to this, they'd be like, how has Nikki gone into tech and cyber? Yes, I was in a technical core. However, obviously the military your path is kind of led, to keep that work-home life balance. And some will be quite surprised, especially the role I'm doing now. I'd say going back on the tools rather than facilitating, and solely managing. So it's kind of that, it's given me that bottom-up approach now. So it's given me that experience where, I'm getting to work with, engineers, the vulnerability managers, the governance risk compliance, which is where I thought I would end up originally. But obviously, you follow a path, you're going to go and try it, which I am doing. So that's my top tip. Just go with yourself. Don't be interested on what your friends are doing, even if they're in the same cat badge, or even on TechVets, you'll find that people do branch out, still stay within tech and cyber, but they choose their own path in the end. So you can study. It doesn't mean if you study something, you're going to go into that field or that job role. It's just giving yourself that holistic view, I think. So I've learned some things which are probably totally irrelevant to the role I'm doing now. However, it will help out in the future. So that's all I can say. Just keep learning, stay well-rounded, and follow your own path.
It's a great tip. I mean, if that pick your own route, follow your own path is a great bit of advice there. Lovely question from Michelle Haffen. James, just going to read out, say again that site again you were talking about.
Yeah, well, if I go into my top tips, I'll cover it in that. But I think my first one will be research. It's super important. You've got to do your research. Don't just listen to people. It comes from the whole scale of research, from understanding your local ecosystem, your local region, what opportunities are available there, so you're not upskilling in a discipline that's going to be irrelevant, in where you live, all the way through to whether it's the sort of industry that you like. You may want to just get out and do dog walking, for Christ's sake, and it's not a bad thing. But doing that research up front will enable you to make those informed decisions. And again, as part of that research, have a look at what you want to do within cybersecurity. You may not be able to start there, but it's really important to understand what you're passionate about, because that can help shape your journey. And as Michelle asked, the site that I suggested earlier is the UK Cybersecurity Council. And I think the website is ukcybersecuritycouncil.org.uk. Thanks, Shaw, for popping it up. The UK Cybersecurity Council has been a sort of collaboration between NCSE, DCMS, CISEC, CREST, all sorts of industry bodies within the UK, and they're going to help start to shape a more standardized approach so people can get really good information there. Once you've done your research and you know roughly where you want to go and what you want to do, that's the bit when you can start networking. And networking, as Nikki said, is just critical, because that will help you really target that research that you do into specific individuals and companies and departments within companies. And you can start learning a lot more about industry. And certainly one thing that I will always suggest is that if you are a service leaver or a veteran, or you're still serving and you're planning for the future, join up with TechVets, because you're going to get access to a ready-made network with deep links into industry. You've got people like Luke and Nikki in our community who can help. And additionally, you can access all the training stuff. And we work with organizations that provide training that's worthwhile doing, whether that's Immersive Labs Academy, the Veterans Digital Cyber Academy, whether it's industry technologies like Splunk Fundamentals 1 and 2, huge growth in opportunities there. Fortinet security network specialists, you can get that through the NSE framework. There's loads of opportunities with Fortinet and their partners. And we've got SANS work studies. We've got TriHackMe vouchers. I'm just about to go live with another 10 premium content TriHackMe vouchers. And as Luke alluded to, that he used that as well. There's lots on offer there. You've got the PEGA Academy now to get people into PEGA roles. Stuff's just increasing by the month. And then clearly we can help you with those links, tie into employers who specifically want the skills that veterans bring. And generally they're not the technical skills, because we don't have that many people leaving with loads of technical skills, specifically in networking, being network specialists. So it's understanding that you've got that community there that's absolutely free of charge. There's no hooks or anything, and everything is valid. There's no sales. So you'll just get honest advice and guidance. So definitely join TechVets. My final point will be absolutely get hands-on. You need to get fingers on your keyboard, and you need to learn properly. If you want to be more technical, you've got to dive in. Don't be scared to get involved with stuff. We've got the Capture the Flag team in TechVets. We've got the Hack the Box team if you're a little bit more technical. But the Capture the Flag team can be for beginners. Rihanna is our team captain. She is smashing it. They're like 22nd in the UK. And you can get involved in all sorts of stuff as a team where you can learn from each other as well. And that's really important, because when it comes to the technical interviews like Luke did, that's when you can start explaining how to solve those problems, because you've got experience of doing so. But yeah, definitely get stuck into TechVets.
Brilliant, James. Great tips there. And what's your sense, Luke? What would you add to that list?
To that, I think the main one is more of a cliche life lesson of don't let the industry place their limitations on you. Like the amount of times I was told, you're not coming from a cyber background, you don't have IT experience, you can't be a pen tester straight away. You cannot go into this field because you're supposed to do all of this first. But it's just focusing on what you want to do as a veteran. When it came down to the winning interview, there was a few technical questions. Then we spent 25 minutes of me just talking through what I'd been doing on like Hack the Box. And then what actually sort of won my position there was all my experience in the military, being an instructor and dealing with high stress situations. They were like, you've got a lot to learn, but we think you'll be fine because you have all this military experience. So definitely just, if you do pick offensive, I think it is becoming quite competitive entry level, because everybody kind of just thinks, oh, cool, I want to be a hacker. And that's the first thing they go for. So if you do pick that, then just keep going. Don't let people tell you can't do it, because, well, you can.
Yeah.
Great way to finish those points there. And an interesting thing about lovely recommendation there from Aaron. Thank you very much, Aaron McManus-Wood, there about his experience with TechVets and actually the fantastic service it provides, etc. I mean, I would say, without going back, adding to all of the list, I mean, some really great tips in there. And one thing really is about having confidence. And I think anyone who's served in the armed forces for whatever time can use the confidence. The things which we've been talking about, perhaps a bit earlier on, about training, and we all bang on about training. Everyone's been trained, from basic training or for whatever, how long you serve, but it's not just about that. It's the fact we've all been trained, but we're also trainable, and that's quite an interesting thing. So it's and also important, can train others, because from really quite junior operators of the armed forces end up training people who've just come in behind them, and that's a thing which doesn't really happen until much more senior levels in Civvy Street, frankly. So you can think about having confidence about those sorts of things. And on the leadership management, again, from the most junior infantry soldier, very, very quickly is in situations when is doing things, leading a small group of men or women. And again, that quite often it's only when people are in their 30s, let's say, who've not served in the armed forces, for the first time they're actually managing another person. So bear all these things in mind, and certainly we're all on with the other great things about networking, about preparation, about following your path, etc., to really have the confidence to get into that interview and really go for it. And there's another good question here for Nikki. So for somebody in the defensive side, does she recommend any tools other than Splunk to practice with on a home lab network? Perhaps as a skill set that most employers look for. What do you reckon, Nikki?
Well, me personally, I've only ever used Splunk at home, so I can't really expand on that one. However, obviously, every employer will have its own preference to obviously what you're going to learn on. You've got different things, more hands-on, like your LinkedIn Learning, your Plural sites, your Splunk, your immersive labs, which is brilliant if you can get onto that. And there's a lot of open source tools out there. So my main focus was around the Splunk area. I didn't really venture off that. And then again, it depends once you get into that role, what is the preferred learning method. But obviously TechVets have got a good immersive labs relationship, haven't they, James? So
yeah. So we've got the foundational sort of labs. There's 261 labs. It's their academy version, but it's great gamified hands-on learning, and it's they're clearly a very successful company because the training is so phenomenal. But there is some stuff there for offensive and defensive aspiring specialists. But yeah, I think the best thing to do, you will have people that live and breathe this stuff on a daily basis, and the community is definitely a strong place to go for that. There will always be someone to answer who's probably running something at home as your question is posted. But Alistair, you mentioned the confidence as well. I think sometimes there's a little bit of a facade there. Many people lose that confidence because it's fear of the unknown, and that it's something very new. And again, having that community behind you to support you helps you to build that confidence back up and go into those interviews, and get success. We had one of my volunteers the other day was going for a position, and it was something new. And he wanted some support, and one of the guys in the community jumped on a call with him and walked him through the sort of bits that he should be considering, and then he ended up landing the role. He was successful at the interview because he was able to go into it confidently, because that fear of the unknown was removed because there was someone there who lives and breathes that stuff, who's able to provide that advice and guidance. Just because people like giving back, and that's what we're all about in the military community generally.
It's a great point, James. I completely agree. I mean, I think it's the key thing with the various sort of processes, various stages that people are at. Let's say, it's the initial scoping, and then it's looking at the sectors and environments and sort of thing, and then getting a CV. I mean, again, these things are pretty important, and there is a lot of advice and support out there. So do look on the websites. Obviously, if you're still in transition, there's the CTP, Career Transition Partnership, but also RFEA website. There's all sorts of really good tools about how to do CV work, prepare the right sort of thing. And then, of course, then you get selected for interview, and all the tips for about an interview. We've been covering quite a few of these things over the last 55 minutes or so. So just remember those sort of things. Have that confidence, and in interview preparation, I think it's really good. But there are great sources of things. The TechVets, fantastic for the tech cyber industry, and all the things we've been talking about. The RFEA website for more general issues. I think sometimes I think about when you get to an interview, you just have to bear in mind that any employer is looking for three things. The first thing is, can they do the job? That's quite a big thing, isn't it? So skills, that sort of thing. The second thing is, do you want the job? Again, when I left, I couldn't really understand when somebody said that to me. So, of course you want the job. Well, actually, it can come out sometimes that people go for an interview and their heart's not really in it. Well, okay. And the third one, will they fit in? That's an absolutely key thing. And there are some really great operators, people leaving the armed forces, who were pretty good on the first one, good on the second one. They're as keen as anything. And they don't think about so much the fitting in. Come back to Nikki's point about the chameleon-like moving on. And I think it's for us all to cherish our military backgrounds, but don't make so much of a thing about it that, frankly, people say, oh God, all they're doing is banging on about their time in the Navy or their time in the Army. You need to move on. Think about the the new environment we work in is exactly that Luke is doing, and Nikki, in fact, and James as well. Luke, interesting that the difference in environment, let's say from the Royal Tank Regiment to what now doing as a pen tester, is huge. Now seamlessly into it. So think about how to move on, how to make the most, well, not ditching all our service background, etc. But being proud of that, but don't ram it down other people's throats who haven't had the same experience. So I think there's a lot of points in there, a lot of tips. I'm just seeing if there's any more questions.
Well, I love the way that we almost made it sound like Luke's journey was so easy, and I can just picture him now frantically trying to squeeze in an extra 5 minutes somewhere in the day to learn stuff. And actually, we've just made it sound like it was a breeze.
that was half of it, right? So much more.
Well, actually, to be honest, there is probably a key thing in it, and then the other thing is don't give up, because some of these things, we can talk about it because of our experiences, but actually it can be quite a challenging time, and keep. Sometimes people go for interviews, they're not successful. Keep trying, and the right thing will come up when it does. I am just a bit conscious of time, but hopefully, so I think I will draw it to a close, but hopefully that's been a useful session. I must admit, I've really enjoyed it. Really great insights, frankly, into a very exciting industry. And when you look at where it is going and the headlines about the value of tech, a point that James made, and even the top 5 companies a couple of days ago on the news, Imol Rajan talking about the big 5, about the profits they've made over the this last quarter, over 40 billion. The Amazons, the Facebooks, the Apples, etc., Alphabet, all of those. It's a big new industry. It's big and it's growing, and there are a lot of opportunities there. And the amazing is, as I think we talked about, fantastic opportunities for service leavers and veterans, bringing the generic skills, the soft skills and stuff which people have got, and for some who've got the hard skills and the training and stuff in that various experiences in the armed forces. That really is excellent as well. But there's opportunities for a whole raft of different new roles within this area. So don't just think it is just one perception of one thing. So I think there's lots in there, and it's a very exciting time. I hope for those out there, I think there's enough there for you to think about, but do get in touch, TechVets and RFEA, etc., Force Employment Charity, for extra advice and support. And we're here to help you on that journey. Okay. I think I hope you have a good rest of your Friday and the weekend, etc. A lovely sort of flavour to go into the weekend with this really exciting industry, great sector. Thank you very much indeed, Luke. Cheers, James. Cheers, Nikki. Great to.
Well, I just hope that the one next month will be half as good.
Yeah, indeed. Well, actually, thanks for queuing, because we will do another one. We're doing these monthly. In fact, we're going to take a bit of a break through August. Bit of a sort of holiday season, if you like. But the next one I think will be in September, and again another very exciting topic which we'll talk about. But anyway, look forward to that and watch this space for that. Okay. Anyway, have a great weekend. Thank you very much for listening, and thank you for your questions as well. Take care. God bless. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Alan.